Hello there. Welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. And today I'm looking at the 2009 documentary film Cropsey. So this documentary feature, I really was trawling through to try and find something that would catch my attention. And I must say, I do rather like true crime. It's interesting having a documentary like this in the sort of the post-making-a-murderer age, or serial, where it really examines a character and their role in a community, how they could exist in a community and yet commit a crime like what this person did. This really takes its cues from horror films. Anything you read about the documentary says, "Oh, this is the closest to a horror film inside of a documentary that you'll see." I don't necessarily see that, but I can see the cues that it takes from the horror genre. So the documentary is directed by two people, Joshua Zaman and Barbara Brancaccio, and they're examining the local folklore in Staten Island, New York, of a character known as Cropsey. Now, they take it from a very personal perspective, in terms of they both talk about how they respectively grew up in Staten Island and both had accounts of a boogeyman-like figure known as Cropsey. However, this bled into real life when in 1987 a young child went missing, and of course, and the Cropsey law says how this boogeyman figure takes children. In actuality, it was then understood or believed that a man named Andre Rand had taken her. He was then convicted and sentenced to 20 years for kidnapping, but what was unpacked around this man became so much more interesting and cultish that it does tap into the horrific styles of something like Halloween or Friday the 13th. The film, like I said, knowingly wants to bleed into the horror genre. We have this hulking loner, drifter, killer character in Andre Rand. We also have this desolate, desolate perhaps isn't quite the right word, but abandoned and derelict is the word I'm looking for. Derelict area where it's woods that are surrounding an old abandoned building, a subterranean building. Of course, there's the mythology that surrounds it, that looks at things like the building used to be used as a place for people who suffered from tuberculosis. It was a home for people with learning disabilities, and as it presently stands, or it did at the time of the documentary, it became a place for homeless people to use. And because of those very genre-centric settings, people, of course, attached narratives to it. So, of course, you know, the old sort of asylum sort of narrative, people started considering that. There becomes questions about whether there's some kind of devil-worshipping cult, whether this man Andre Rand was a leader amongst the homeless, and whether they were part of a band who were kidnapping children. And it does get into the sort of the reads in that, there are sections where the documentarians are doing things like visiting the building, and of course playing into the style of a slasher horror, where one is scared and doesn't want to go in, and the other does want to go in despite the obvious fear of whatever's inside. And like in a funny connection to the last documentary I did, The Leader, His Driver and the Driver's Wife, it very much is about them failing to acquire an interview with Andre Rand. This is obviously played a lot less satirically than the last documentary, in terms of this is just someone who either doesn't want to talk, or if he does want to talk, he wants to be justified or vindicated for the crime / potential crimes that he committed. But it's interesting about the nature of documentary, and especially ones about people and the power of voice or voicelessness. If I go back to Three Identical Strangers, it was about the powerlessness of three people who were adopted and didn't know their relationship to each other. If you look at The Social Dilemma, it's about the fact that everyone now is trying to put their voice out into a world, and consequently drowning in voices that aren't listening. All voice, no listening. And Leader, His Driver and the Driver's Wife is very much about the arrogance of voice, but also the ways that it can be used to both make someone seem threatening and imposing, whilst at the same time, through the power of the documentary, buffoonish and idiotic. And with this, it's very much about the fact that we get one very short phone message from Andre Rand, and that's it. And other than that, we are just told about him and have clips of him being seen without speaking. And of course that creates this atmosphere and a figure that people talk about and describe, but he has no voice. And so therefore he becomes like the boogeyman that is Cropsey, because it's easier to construct him that way if he doesn't sort of break the illusion by simply just being a man. The documentary then, at the time, which would have been 2009, then says how he's about to be released, and follows the fact that, as well as the one missing girl, it opens up to several missing children around that time, and whether he can be convicted for another missing child. I think the one thing the film doesn't do so well is delve into the human loss of it, and the fact that all of these children were suffering from learning disabilities of some kind, and that plays a role in the documentary. But I think the grief and tragedy of it is lost under the desire to make it more terrifying, makes it less saddening. And there are references and interviews with people who do feel sympathetic to these children, but it doesn't have that human touch that I would have liked. But it was an interesting character piece, and as I said, it was interesting as I learn about the different styles of documentary. The idea that the documentary last week was about almost the comedy of something serious, and this is very much about the horror genre structure of something. I already have in mind what I want to do for next week's documentary. This time and so I'm rather excited about it, but I won't spoil what it is right now, but it's going to be something pretty cool and fairly infamous. So thanks again for joining me. I'll see you again tomorrow. Take care.